When I stepped outside that morning, I thought the rumble shaking my windows was thunder. Turns out it was worse, a bulldozer carving a 10-foot trench around my entire property like I was under siege. The foreman leaned out of his cab and said, "HOA orders, sir. No access until dues are paid." I stared at the muddy moat surrounding my driveway, my mailbox dangling like a hostage on an island of dirt. Across the street, neighbors peeked through blinds, pretending not to watch the circus. The HOA president, Karen, stood at the edge of the trench in her red blazer, arms crossed, satisfied. She thought she'd finally cornered me. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just another homeowner fighting back. I was their creditor. And that trench they dug, it was about to become their own grave. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, comment where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button for more wild HOA stories like this one. When I first moved back to Ironwood Acres, I didn't plan on starting a war. I just wanted peace. My parents' old ranch-style home sat on 3 acres of open-land oak trees, a small barn, a windmill, and a porch swing that creaked every time the wind shifted. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. And for a while, life was quiet until the HOA decided that quiet was a problem. It started with a letter. "Dear resident, your property falls under the jurisdiction of the Ironwood Homeowners Association. Please review our community standards and remit your first annual fee of $1,200 within 30 days. I laughed out loud when I read it. My father had built this house decades before the HOA even existed. I wasn't part of their community. I didn't have access to their pool, their tennis court, or their little neighborhood newsletter where everyone tattled on each other for leaving trash cans out overnight. So I wrote back politely but firmly, not a member. Not paying. That's when Karen Whitley entered my life. Karen was the self-appointed queen of Ironwood, mid-50s sharp haircut lipstick that could stop traffic and a personality somewhere between a school principal and a prison warden. Her red blazers were as bright as her temper. She had a voice that could slice through drywall and a habit of calling every man under 50 young man, even when they were paying her mortgage and property taxes. The first time she showed up, she didn't even bother knocking. I was fixing the gate when I heard her heels crunching on the gravel driveway. "Mr. Hayes," she began, holding a clipboard like a sword, "we need to discuss your non-compliance with HOA standards." "Non-compliance?" I asked. "Karen, my house isn't in your HOA." She gave me that tight smile only people with too much Botox and too little patience can manage. "That's where you're mistaken. The new subdivision line places your property within Ironwood Acres governance. It's all in our records. Show me," I said. She blinked. "Excuse me, show me the deed, the survey, the map. Anything official." She didn't have them, of course. She just had her clipboard and the conviction that yelling loud enough made her right. That day she fined me $50 for unauthorized livestock because of my old horse Daisy. The next week, another letter arrived, $75 for unapproved exterior color scheme. Apparently beige wasn't HOA-approved beige. Then came the fine for my windmill, then for the flagpole, then for having a mailbox that wasn't the standard HOA model. By the third week, my kitchen counter looked like a collection of Monopoly bills, fake money for fake authority. I ignored them all. That's when the real harassment began. Every morning, I'd wake to find HOA notices taped to my fence posts, warnings stuffed under my windshield wipers, and voicemail messages from the compliance committee, which, by the way, was just Karen and her 2 best friends, Rhonda and Jeanette, who lived to gossip and glare. They claimed I was lowering neighborhood property values. I claimed they were raising my blood pressure. It escalated fast. One evening I came home to find fresh orange spray paint across my gravel driveway. Violation, owe a notice. I grabbed my pressure washer and cleaned it off before my dinner got cold. But I wasn't angry yet. Not really. I figured Karen was just another petty control freak with too much time and not enough meaning in her life. I had better things to do. Until the trench. That morning, the one that started this story, I realized this wasn't about property lines anymore. It was about power, and Karen wasn't playing around. When I asked the foreman who hired him, he pointed toward the HOA clubhouse and said, "That lady in red said the board approved it." "Board approved it," I repeated, laughing. "Did the board also approve trespassing on private property?" He shrugged. "Sir, I just dig where they tell me." They had cut into the edge of my land, tore through my driveway, and destroyed part of my irrigation system. It was vandalism, dressed as landscaping enforcement. Karen stood on the far side, arms crossed, smirking. "Maybe next time you'll answer our letters," she said. I took a long look at her. "You're going to regret this, Karen," she chuckled. "Oh, I don't think so. You can't win against the HOA. That's when I smiled. A slow, patient smile that made her frown just a little. Because while she was busy writing fake fines and pretending to run a kingdom, I was quietly sitting on something far more powerful, a legal debt that she didn't even know existed. You see, before moving back home, I'd spent 20 years in real estate finance. I bought distressed loans, refinanced old developments, and handled foreclosure recovery. When my parents passed, I semi-retired. I didn't need to work anymore, but I liked keeping an eye on the market. And wouldn't you know it, a few years earlier, the Ironwood HOA had taken out a big loan to build their fancy new clubhouse and pool, the kind of project Karen loved to show off in her little HOA newsletter. But the board never repaid it. The loan went delinquent. The bank sold it off cheap, like they always do. And guess who bought it just for fun during a late-night investment spree? Me. That's right. On paper, I owned the debt. I never planned to use it. It was more of a curiosity than a weapon. Until that morning when Karen decided to turn my property into a moat. While she was measuring my grass with a ruler and threatening fines, I was holding her HOA's financial leash. So when I stood there watching that trench fill with muddy water, I wasn't angry. I was calculating. I called my lawyer that afternoon. "Mike," I said, "remember that HOA note we bought 2 years ago?" "Yeah," he replied. "Why?" I smiled. "It's time to collect." Mike chuckled, thinking I was joking. But I wasn't. By sunset, he'd pulled the documents, every unpaid invoice, every missed payment, every line of the debt transfer. All of it pointed to one conclusion: the Ironwood HOA owed me. And now, with their little trench operation, I had all the evidence I needed to prove they'd crossed not just a moral line, but a legal one. The irony was delicious. They thought they were burying me. But they were the ones standing in the hole. That night, I stood on my porch, sipping coffee, watching the moonlight reflect off the muddy water encircling my home. Across the street, Karen's blinds twitched. She was watching me too. I raised my mug toward her in a silent toast. "Game on," I whispered. Because this wasn't just a property dispute anymore. This was a reckoning. And I had the paperwork to bury them one legal clause at a time. By the next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. Half the street was talking about the trench incident, while the other half was pretending they didn't see it. The HOA's little propaganda machine, aka the neighborhood Facebook group, was on fire. "He's a danger to the community. Karen's doing what's necessary to protect property values. He brought this on himself." I read every comment with my morning coffee smirking. They had no idea that the danger wasn't me. It was the quiet stack of paperwork sitting in my study. My lawyer Mike called just after sunrise. "I've gone through everything. You're gonna love this," he said. The HOA missed 18 payments over the last 4 years. The loan was transferred to you in full with all enforcement rights. Translation: you own their debt. I chuckled. "So, if they owe me money, that means..." Mike interrupted, "You can technically foreclose on their assets, clubhouse, pool, everything they financed under that loan." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the slow, satisfying rush of irony. "So the HOA that dug a moat around my house is living on my dime." "Exactly," Mike said. "Do you want me to send them a notice of default?" "Not yet," I replied. "Let's make this educational." That afternoon, I walked over to the clubhouse, Karen's kingdom. You couldn't miss it. Big white columns, a fountain that hadn't worked in months, and a shiny private property, HOA members only sign bolted to the gate. Karen was there, of course, standing beside the pool with her clipboard, and her ever-faithful lieutenants Rhonda and Jeanette. They looked like a trio of suburban witches waiting for a sacrifice. I approached with a calm smile. "Ladies," I greeted. Karen's smile froze. "Mr. Hayes, I hope you're here to apologize and pay your dues." I laughed lightly. "Actually, I'm here to collect yours." Her brow furrowed. "Excuse me," I pulled out a manila folder from my briefcase and opened it slowly, theatrically. "You see this clubhouse, this pool, this pretty little fountain, it all sits under a loan the HOA took out 5 years ago. That loan went unpaid. The bank sold it. And guess who bought it?" Karen blinked, her face twitching. "You're bluffing." I handed her the first page, the assignment of debt, stamped and notarized. "Read it." Her friends leaned in, whispering. Karen's hand trembled slightly as she scanned the documents. The red in her cheeks deepened into something between anger and panic. This doesn't mean anything," she stammered. "You can't just..." I interrupted. "And I will if you don't remove that trench by the end of the week." Her eyes darted from me to the papers, then back again. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled, calm as ever. "Try me." I turned to leave, but not before saying, "You've been so busy digging holes, Karen. I hope you like the view from the bottom." By the next day, the HOA board was in full crisis mode. Emergency meetings, conference calls, frantic emails. Karen's red blazer practically became her uniform of panic. They tried to act tough in public, but inside I knew they were scrambling. Meanwhile, I started documenting everything. Drone shots of the trench, photos of the damaged irrigation lines, recordings of Karen's threats. My lawyer called it overkill. I called it insurance. I even installed a couple of motion-activated cameras by the property line. If they so much as sneezed in my direction, I'd have evidence. But Karen wasn't giving up. Oh no, not her. That weekend, I woke to the sound of hammering. When I stepped outside, there were no trespassing. HOA property signs staked along my fence line. On my property. I nearly laughed myself sick. I called the sheriff's department. 2 deputies showed up, took one look at the trench, and whistled. They actually did this, one of them asked. Yep, I said. And now they're claiming my land. He scratched his head. This is civil, but man, this is messed up. They took a report anyway. Karen showed up halfway through ranting about community rights and unauthorized access. The deputy cut her off mid-sentence. Ma'am, he's the property owner. You don't have authority here. You could practically see the steam shooting out of her ears. When they left, she hissed at me. You think you've won? I leaned in slightly and whispered, Karen, I don't think. I calculate. The next few days felt like a game of chess. Every time Karen made a move, I countered it with paperwork. She sent letters demanding back dues. I sent certified notices of default and pending foreclosure. She tried to rally the neighborhood against me. I quietly emailed each homeowner attaching the HOA's financial records, public information, by the way, that showed every dollar misused, every unpaid debt, and every administrative bonus Karen paid herself. The effect was nuclear. Within 48 hours, the community chat went from gossiping about me to questioning Karen's leadership. People demanded transparency. Some even demanded her resignation. That's when I knew I had her cornered. Still, I wasn't out for blood, just balance. I didn't want to destroy the HOA entirely. I wanted them to learn. But Karen wasn't the type to learn. She was the type to lash out. On the 5th day after my ultimatum, a truck arrived at my gate, a private security company. 3 men in uniform stepped out and began measuring my fence, taking notes. I walked out calmly. Something I can help you with, one of them said. We're here on behalf of the Ironwood HOA. They've filed a safety inspection claim. I laughed. You mean they're trespassing again? They looked uneasy. Sir, we're just following orders. Yeah, I said. That's what Trench Guy said too. I called Mike immediately. Time to move, I told him. File the lien enforcement. We're done being polite. That evening, Mike delivered the paperwork to the HOA board by hand. A notice of intent to foreclose. Legal, binding, irrefutable. When Karen opened the door and saw him, she went pale. This is harassment, she shrieked. Mike smiled politely. No, ma'am. This is debt collection. The next morning I woke to the sweetest sound imaginable: silence. The bulldozers were gone. The trench crew had packed up. The signs had vanished. Karen's Facebook group went private, then disappeared. Neighbors started waving at me again, some awkwardly, some apologetically, but I wasn't celebrating yet, because I knew people like Karen. They don't surrender, they plot. And sure enough, 2 days later I got a letter slipped under my door. No stamp, no name. Just typed words on crisp white paper. You may think you've won, but this isn't over. I built this neighborhood and I won't let you tear it down. You don't belong here. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and dropped it in the shredder. Then I poured myself another coffee, sat on the porch, and smiled. Because deep down I knew what she didn't. The more she fought, the deeper she'd dig herself into trouble. And when that happened, I'd be right there watching, waiting, holding the shovel of truth. By the end of that week, Ironwood Acres felt like a ghost town. No kids on bikes, no neighbors jogging, no barbecues. Just silence, and the occasional sound of Karen's SUV screeching around the cul-de-sac like a red comet of fury. I knew that silence meant one thing: the board was panicking. And panic always leads to mistakes. Mike called early Monday morning. They tried filing a counterclaim, he said. Claiming your lien is invalid because you have a personal interest in the community. I laughed. They're saying I can't collect because I live here. Pretty much, I smiled. Perfect. That means they've officially recognized my property as outside the HOA. Mike paused. You're right. Exactly, I said. Their own argument just killed their jurisdiction. Karen had no idea she'd just walked into her own trap. Later that day, I received a notice taped to my gate, handwritten in Karen's signature looping letters, notice of board hearing. You are hereby summoned to attend an HOA disciplinary session regarding multiple violations of community standards, including but not limited to obstruction, property damage, and defamation. Failure to attend will result in legal escalation." The irony was almost poetic. I called Mike. "We're going," I said. He sighed. "You really want to face them in person? Oh, I wouldn't miss it for the world." The meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. at the HOA clubhouse, the same building technically listed under my lien. When we arrived, every board member was there, Karen at the head table, Rhonda and Jeanette flanking her like loyal guards, and 5 other members staring down at us as if we were on trial. The room smelled like burnt coffee and cheap air freshener. A big banner behind Karen read, "Protecting Ironwood's Integrity." The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Karen cleared her throat dramatically. "Mr. Hayes," she began, "we've convened this hearing because your recent actions have endangered the unity of this community. You've posted defamatory content online, refused to comply with HOA regulations," and I raised a hand. "Karen, you forgot the part where you dug a moat around my house." She slammed her palm on the table. "This is our meeting, not yours," Mike leaned forward calmly. "Actually, Mrs. Whitley, you're holding this meeting in a building that's under a defaulted lien owned by my client. Technically, this is his property until your association pays the outstanding balance." The room went dead silent. Karen blinked, her lips tightening. "That's absurd. You can't prove Mike reached into his briefcase and laid down a stack of documents thick enough to stun a moose. Here's the deed of trust, the assignment of rights, and the full payment history, well, lack thereof. The HOA owes $423, 0 inches principal plus interest." Rhonda gasped. Jeanette whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Karen's voice cracked. "You can't enforce that," I smiled. "I don't need to. You're doing that for me." She glared at me, face flushed crimson. "What do you want, Hayes?" "Simple," I said. "Fill the trench, fix my property, and stop pretending you run my life. You have 7 days. If not, I start foreclosure. The sheriff's office will auction this clubhouse, your pool, and that fancy sign out front." The board erupted in chatter. A few members were clearly terrified. Others looked betrayed. One elderly man stood up, pointing at Karen. "You told us we were debt-free. You said everything was handled." Karen shot him a death glare. "Sit down, George." Mike gathered the papers back into his case. "You have until Friday, 5 p.m., he said. "After that, the law moves on its own." We stood to leave. I turned to Karen and said, "You should have just knocked on my door instead of digging a hole." The sound of the door closing behind us was the sweetest music I'd heard all week. The next few days were chaos. Karen launched a desperate PR campaign, handing out flyers, calling me a hostile investor and a threat to Ironwood values. She even emailed residents claiming I was weaponizing the legal system to dismantle their community. It backfired spectacularly. One by one, homeowners started showing up at my door not to complain but to apologize. They'd been fined for ridiculous reasons: a garden gnome, a mismatched curtain color, a car parked slightly crooked. They'd had enough. I hosted an informal meeting in my barn that Saturday. About 20 neighbors came, some nervous, some angry. An older woman named Mrs. Dalton spoke first. She fined me $200 because my grandson's bike left marks on the sidewalk. A man in his 30s added, "She towed my truck while I was at work. Said it was non-compliant paint. It's factory color." The stories poured out like floodwater. By the end of it, everyone agreed they were done being afraid of Karen. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't sleeping. I could tell. Every night her porch light flickered on and off like a warning signal. Her SUV came and went at odd hours. Rumor had it she was meeting with a new lawyer, a real bulldog type. Mike wasn't worried. "If she wants to fight on paper, she's already lost," he said. Still, I knew Karen's pride wouldn't let her quit quietly. That Friday morning, she showed up unannounced, stomping down my driveway like a storm cloud. Her hands trembled as she shoved a letter toward me. "I've filed for an injunction," she hissed. "You're not touching HOA property. I'll see you in court." I took the paper and skimmed it. It was laughable, riddled with procedural errors, half the signatures missing. "Karen, this isn't even valid," I said gently. Her voice cracked. "You think you're better than everyone, don't you, just because you have money?" I sighed. "No, Karen. I just know how to read a contract." She glared at me for a long second, then stormed off heels, digging into the gravel. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of pity and inevitability. I didn't hate her. In a twisted way, I understood her people like Karen need control the way others need air. But when they lose it, they suffocate. That night, Mike called with an update. "We filed the foreclosure motion with the county," he said. "They have 72 hours to respond." I poured myself a drink and looked out over the moonlit trench still scarring my property. The windmill creaked softly, the night bugs humming like an orchestra. 72 hours, I murmured. That's all it takes to turn a queen into a pawn. Mike chuckled on the other end. You sound poetic for a man in a war zone. War zones are where poetry comes from, I said, half smiling. The following morning I woke to find something new at the trench, a banner. Big red letters reading Property of Ironwood Ho. Trespassers will be reported. Karen had struck again, petty to the very end. I sighed, took a picture, and sent it to Mike. Evidence. Add it to the file. He replied within minutes, already ahead of you. At that moment I realized something. This wasn't just about money or property lines. It was about principle. The HOA system at its core was supposed to create order, but in the wrong hands it turned into tyranny. And the only way to break tyranny was to show the tyrant the mirror. And that mirror was coming soon in the form of a court summons. The countdown had begun. 7 days earlier, Karen had smirked when she thought I was powerless. Now, she'd be standing in front of a judge, explaining why the private trench she ordered was carved into land she didn't own. As I turned back toward my house, I caught my reflection in the window, calm, steady, and a little older than I remembered. Almost over, I whispered to myself. But I was wrong. The storm hadn't even started yet. The first sign that things were spiraling came not from Karen herself, but from the HOA's Facebook group, or what was left of it. Overnight, someone leaked the foreclosure notice I'd filed to the public page. By morning, every resident in Ironwood Acres had seen it. The comments section was a digital riot. Wait, the HOA owes money, so the clubhouse isn't even ours. Karen said the loan was paid off last year. Is this guy Hayes serious about owning the HOA's debt? It was like watching a suburban coup unfold online. Karen tried to contain the fire by posting one of her trademark all-caps announcements, "Do not believe online rumors. OA is financially stable." Mr. Hayes is spreading misinformation to discredit the board. But it was too late. Once the internet smells blood, there's no stopping it. Screenshots of her past financial updates, the ones claiming the HOA had a zero-debt policy, were already circulating. Neighbors began comparing notes, realizing their dues had mysteriously increased while community maintenance decreased. By noon, 2 local news stations had reached out to me for interviews. I wasn't looking for fame, but I was looking for accountability. So I gave them the facts, calmly, without exaggeration. The HOA took out a loan for community development, I told the reporter. They defaulted. I legally acquired the debt. Now, instead of fixing the problem, they've chosen to intimidate homeowners, including digging a trench around my property. The reporter blinked. Wait, they actually dug a trench. I pointed toward the muddy moat visible behind me. Still there. That evening, Ironwood Acres became a circus. News vans lined the streets. Drones buzzed overhead. Karen tried to shoo reporters away, shouting that they were trespassing on private HOA land. But every camera turned to her, capturing her flushed face and trembling hands. When one journalist asked if the HOA was insolvent, she snapped, "Of course not, this man is delusional." Meanwhile, I just stood by my mailbox, coffee in hand, watching it all unfold like a bad reality show. Within hours, the video went viral. The headline read, "Local Ho dug a moat around homeowner's house, now owes him hundreds of thousands." The comment section was pure gold. You can't spell hole without ho. Finally, a man who fights back. That Karen just made HOA stand for Hold On Attorney. Karen must have spent the entire night drafting her next move, because by the next morning an email went out to all residents. It was titled, "An Urgent Message from Your HOA President." It was 8 paragraphs of finger-pointing and denial. She accused me of financial blackmail, claimed I forged documents, and said I was a disgruntled investor exploiting legal loopholes. She even tried to discredit me personally. Mr. Hayes has a history of aggressive property dealings and has chosen to target our peaceful community for his own gain. Mike read the email and burst out laughing. "Aggressive property dealings. What are you, a pirate?" I smirked. "Apparently a trench pirate." Then he got serious. "She's losing it. This is classic deflection. She's trying to make you the villain because she can't control the narrative anymore." "Then it's time we finish this publicly," I said. We decided to hold a community Q&A session open to all Ironwood residents at the county courthouse auditorium. Neutral ground. No HOA banners. No Karen's clipboard. The turnout shocked even me. Dozens of homeowners showed up clutching printouts of their fines, invoices, and HOA letters. Karen arrived last, flanked by her loyal duo Rhonda and Jeanette, wearing the same crimson blazer she'd worn the day she ordered the trench. Mike began calmly, "We're not here for drama. We're here for facts. The HOA owes a substantial debt. That debt is held by my client, Mr. Hayes. These are public records available to anyone. He clicked a slide onto the projector, the official county recorded loan document stamped with dates, signatures, and most importantly, the HOA's name. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen stood up. This is misrepresentation. Those records are outdated. Mike scrolled to the next slide, a notice of non-payment dated 3 months prior. Silence. He continued. Under state law, a defaulted HOA loan grants the creditor rights to lien and foreclosure proceedings on association-owned property. My client has every legal right to enforce those terms. Karen's face turned scarlet. He's threatening to steal our community. I stood, then keeping my voice even. I don't want your community, Karen. I just want you to stop pretending you own mine. The room erupted in murmurs, some supportive, some stunned. A man in the front row, Mr. Dalton, raised his hand. Is it true you used our dues to pay for those landscaping contracts that never happened? Karen froze. Another voice. And what about the security cameras that were supposed to go up last year? And another. You fined me $300 for my mailbox. Where did that money go? Her composure shattered. Enough, she barked. You're all ungrateful. Without me, this place would fall apart. The room fell deadly quiet. Then Mrs. Dalton, an elderly widow who'd lived there since the 82nds, whispered, Maybe it should. Karen's eyes darted around, realizing she'd lost them, all of them. The meeting ended with the board voting to place Karen on administrative leave. She stormed out mid-vote, slamming the door so hard one of the ceiling tiles dropped loose. Outside, she cornered me near the parking lot. You think this is over, she spat. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I looked her dead in the eye. You embarrassed yourself. I just held up the mirror. She trembled, pointing a shaking finger. You'll regret this. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Then she drove off tires, squealing. I watched her go, feeling the mix of satisfaction and caution that comes when you know you've won the battle but not the war. The next day, the county inspector arrived with orders to evaluate the trench. After a full survey, he declared it a public safety hazard and issued an immediate removal order. Karen's replacement, a timid accountant named Ben, called me personally. Mr. Hayes, we've decided to comply. The trench will be filled by tomorrow. I thanked him. Good choice. By sunset, heavy machinery returned, but this time to undo what had been done. As I watched the dirt pour back into the gaping wound around my property, I felt something shift. Not just the soil, the balance of power. For months, Karen had used fear to control everyone. But now the same people who once followed her blindly were whispering about audits, resignations, and refunds. Still, something in me couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't finished. That night I got a text from an unknown number. Enjoy your victory, Robert. Some holes go deeper than you think. No signature, but I didn't need one. I stared at the message for a long moment before locking my phone and stepping onto the porch. The trench was gone, but the memory of it still cut through the ground like a scar. I took a deep breath, looking up at the stars. Karen had lost control, but people like her rarely go quietly. And sure enough, what came next would make the trench look like child's play, because I was about to find out just how deep her lies really went. 2 days after the trench was filled, Ironwood Acres looked deceptively peaceful again. The lawns were trimmed, kids were back on their bikes, and neighbors who once whispered behind curtains were now waving like they hadn't been part of a suburban mutiny. On the surface, it looked like the calm after a storm, but anyone who's lived through one knows the air feels too still before the next wave hits. And in my gut, I knew the storm wasn't done. Mike confirmed it the next morning with a short, grim text. She's lawyering up. Of course she was. Karen Whitley wasn't the type to fade quietly into HOA history. She was the type to light the filing cabinet on fire and call it victory. By noon, we got the paperwork, a 30-page complaint filed in county court. The accusations were ridiculous. Defamation, harassment, intentional emotional distress. She even claimed I'd caused her sleeplessness and anxiety by undermining her community authority. Mike nearly spit his coffee. You can't make this stuff up. Oh, she can, I said. She's been doing it for years. But beneath the absurdity was something dangerous. She wasn't doing this alone. Her new attorney, Gregory Falk, was a notorious bulldog who made his living off HOA disputes. I knew his type, loud, expensive, and proud of it. We had to respond fast. The next morning, we walked into the Ironwood HOA's emergency board meeting, summoned by Karen's remaining allies. The clubhouse was packed, board members, homeowners, and even a local reporter pretending to check her phone in the back row. Karen was there too, of course, sitting at the head of the table like a dethroned monarch refusing to abdicate. Her red blazer was replaced with navy blue, her serious legal color, no doubt. Falk sat beside her, oozing confidence. Mike and I took our seats across from them. Karen smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Mr. Hayes, she began sweetly, thank you for coming. I believe we can resolve this civilly. Civilly, I echoed. You dug a trench around my home. She ignored that. We've decided to settle this matter internally within the board. You'll retract your foreclosure notice, remove your online posts, and publicly apologize for defaming this association. I blinked. Defaming Falk leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, your actions have caused significant reputational harm to this community. The viral videos, the media coverage, all of that reflects poorly on Ironwood Acres. I smiled thinly. You mean it reflects poorly on her? Karen slammed her hand on the table. You ruined my reputation, I leaned in. No, Karen. You ruined it the day you turned a neighborhood into your personal empire. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Falk tried to regain control. Regardless, we're prepared to offer you a settlement provided you release all liens and agree not to pursue foreclosure. Mike raised an eyebrow. And what's your offer? Falk smiled smugly. We'll pay you $20,000 and consider this closed. I laughed. Loudly. Karen's jaw tightened. What's so funny, Karen, I said, still smiling. The HOA owes me $400,000. And you're offering me 20 grand and a handshake. Her nostrils flared. That's all you'll get. You're bluffing about that debt and we both know it. Mike slid a document across the table. Actually, we do know it because it's right here. It was a notarized county record showing the loan's full balance and the HOA's name in bold. Karen's confidence evaporated like steam. The room erupted into chaos. Board members began talking over one another. A woman in the back shouted, "You told us it was paid off." Another man slammed his folder shut. "You made us vote to raise dues to cover landscaping." Where did the money go, Karen? Karen's eyes darted around, searching for an ally. Rhonda and Jeanette looked ready to sink into their chairs. "This is out of context," Karen shouted. "I did what was best for Ironwood," I stood slowly. "You did what was best for you." She pointed at me, voice trembling with rage. "You're the reason this community's falling apart." I took a step closer. "No, Karen. I'm the reason it's finally standing up." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. For the first time since this war began, Karen didn't have a comeback. That's when Mike placed a manila envelope on the table. As of this morning, he said the county has approved foreclosure proceedings. If your association doesn't satisfy the debt in 10 business days, Mr. Hayes will legally acquire the HOA's assets. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Rhonda whispered, "You said we had time." Jeanette mumbled, "You said the loan was settled." Karen's hand began to shake. "This is manipulation. It's a setup." I looked her in the eye. "No, Karen, it's accountability." Then something unexpected happened. One of the younger board members, a guy named Andrew, stood up and faced the crowd. "I move that we remove Karen Whitley as HOA president effective immediately." You could have heard a pin drop. Another voice joined seconded. Karen's face went white. "You can't do this." The board voted one by one. 5 in favor, 2 opposed. It was over. Karen pushed back her chair so hard it screeched. "You're all cowards," she screamed. "You'll regret this." Then she grabbed her purse, stormed toward the door, and slammed it so hard that the window rattled. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then slowly the room broke into applause. It wasn't for me. It wasn't even for the board. It was for the fact that finally Ironwood Acres belonged to its residents again, not its dictator. Later that night, Mike and I sat on my porch watching the sun dip below the oaks. "She'll appeal," he said. "I know, but she's done," he added. "Public opinion's gone. The debt's clear. There's nowhere for her to run." I nodded, but part of me didn't believe it. People like Karen never think they've lost, they just look for new angles. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was an email. From an anonymous sender. Subject, "You don't know what she's capable of." Attached was a single PDF file, a scanned document labeled Ironwood Loan Amendment Confidential. I opened it. My stomach dropped. It showed a new signature page dated just 2 months ago with Karen's signature under a refinancing agreement. But here's the catch. The property owner listed wasn't the Ironwood HOA. It was a company called Whitley Development LLC, and the signature witnesses were forged. I leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Oh my God." Mike looked at me. "What is it?" I turned the laptop toward him. "She didn't just mismanage the HOA, she stole it." He stared at the screen, stunned. "That's felony fraud." I nodded slowly, the weight of it settling in. "She's not done," I said quietly. "She's just getting desperate." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, real thunder this time, and I knew the next battle wasn't going to be about land or money or pride. It was going to be about the law. And this time, Karen wasn't just facing me. She was facing justice. The morning after discovering the fraudulent document, I woke up before sunrise. The air felt heavy thick with that kind of silence that sits on your shoulders. Even the birds were quiet. My first instinct was to tell Mike, but when I checked my phone, he had already texted me. "Meet me at the county recorder's office. Bring coffee. We've got something." Something. That word sent a chill down my spine. I drove through the still sleepy streets of Ironwood Acres, past the houses that Karen once ruled like a queen. The trench was gone now, grass already starting to grow where it once cut through the land. But even with the dirt filled in, you could still see the scar, a faint outline like the neighborhood's own memory of fear. At the recorder's office, Mike was already there, papers spread across the table like puzzle pieces. "You're not going to believe this," he said as I handed him a cup of black coffee. "Try me," I muttered. He slid over a document with the county seal stamped on top. Karen's company, Whitley Development LLC, filed a quitclaim deed 2 months ago. She transferred the HOA's assets into her company's name. I frowned. But she can't. The HOA's a non-profit corporation. "You can't just transfer property like that." Mike nodded grimly. "Exactly, which means it's fraudulent." She forged the other board members' signatures. He showed me the comparison real signatures from old meeting minutes versus the new ones on the deed. The forgeries weren't even subtle. One was spelled wrong. "So she tried to make herself the owner of the HOA," I said, slowly piecing it together. "That means she tried to move the debt off the association and into her own fake company." Right, Mike confirmed. "She refinanced with a private lender to cover the debt but never filed it with the county. Probably hoped to cash out before anyone noticed." I ran a hand over my face. "And now that we've filed foreclosure, she's cornered." We exchanged a look that said what neither of us wanted to say aloud. Karen Whitley was about to go down hard. That same afternoon, Mike and I met with the county investigator, a no-nonsense guy named Detective Rowan. He wore a faded gray suit and carried a leather notebook that looked older than both of us. "So," Rowan said, flipping through the pages, "let me get this straight. This HOA president transferred all of the community's property to her own LLC, forged board signatures, and tried to refinance the loan you own." "That's the gist," Mike said. Rowan whistled softly. "That's not civil anymore. That's criminal fraud, maybe even racketeering if she collected dues under false pretenses." He looked up at me. "Mr. Hayes, you willing to testify if this goes to court?" I nodded without hesitation. "After what she's done to this neighborhood?" "Absolutely." Rowan smiled slightly. "Then buckle up. This is about to get messy." Messy was an understatement. 2 days later, unmarked vehicles rolled into Ironwood Acres. County inspectors, financial auditors, even 2 plainclothes investigators from the state attorney's office. They went straight to the HOA clubhouse, now technically under foreclosure, armed with warrants. Karen must have sensed it coming because when they arrived, she was already there, pacing out front like a caged lioness. The news crew wasn't far behind. I watched from across the street as the officers approached her. She started shouting before they even said a word. "This is harassment," she screamed. "You have no authority here. This is my property." One of the officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, you need to step aside. We have a court order." "Court order," she barked. "Show me," he did. Her face fell. In that single second, you could see the truth hit her like a truck. Her kingdom wasn't just crumbling, it was already gone. The officers led her inside. Cameras followed. For the next hour, reporters broadcast the spectacle, live files being boxed up, computers, confiscated, HOA banners taken down. It was surreal watching it unfold on my phone while it was happening just a few hundred feet away. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Karen burst out of the clubhouse doors in handcuffs. The cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. She thrashed against the officer's grip. "You think you've won, Hayes? You think you can destroy me? I built this neighborhood." I stepped forward, staying calm, the crowd parting as I approached. "No, Karen," I said quietly. "You built a trench, and you fell right into it." Her eyes burned with fury, but for once she had no words. They put her into the back of the car, and just like that, the HOA's reign ended with the sound of a door slamming shut. The fallout was immediate. The county froze the HOA's accounts. Residents demanded refunds for years of misused dues. The local paper ran a front-page story, "HOA president arrested in fraud scandal, resident owns association debt." Within days, Ironwood Acres became a national headline. News anchors debated it on morning shows. Online forums dissected every twist. I even saw a meme of the trench with the caption, "When you dig holes, make sure you're not standing in one." I should have felt victorious. vindicated, but honestly I just felt tired. That evening I sat on my porch watching the sunset burn orange across the fields. The old windmill creaked in rhythm with the cicadas. For the first time in months, the air smelled like peace. Mike called. "They're charging her with wire fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of funds," he said. "She's looking at serious time." I nodded. Good. Maybe now people will think twice before weaponizing power over their neighbors. He paused. "You realize technically you now own the HOA." I chuckled. "Yeah. Funny how that works. Any plans?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I think I'll shut it down." The next week I held a final community meeting, open air, no microphones, no titles, just neighbors on folding chairs in my yard. I told them everything, the loan, the fraud, the foreclosure, the whole ugly mess. And when it was done, I said, "The HOA is dissolved. You're free. Keep your lawns however you want, paint your houses whatever color makes you happy. Just don't let fear run this place again." A wave of relief swept through the crowd. Some people clapped, others cried. For the first time in a long time, Ironwood Acres felt like a neighborhood again, not a regime. Afterward, Mrs. Dalton approached me with a smile. "You know," she said softly, "for someone they called the villain, you turned out to be the hero." I laughed. "Heroes don't own liens, ma'am." She patted my arm. "Maybe not. But heroes do what's right when no one else will." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I looked out across my land. The trench was gone, replaced with a new flower bed filled with wild daisies. The soil was uneven, rough in places, but it was healing, just like the neighborhood. From the road, I could see the flashing lights of the last news van leaving. The story was over for everyone else, but for me, it had only just begun. Because sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from the quiet satisfaction of watching truth fill the very hole lies once occupied. And as I sat there, I realized the greatest irony of all. Karen had spent her life digging into other people's business. In the end, she just dug her own. It's strange how quickly chaos can fade into quiet. One day the street is lined with cameras and sheriff's cruisers, and the next, all that's left is the faint smell of mud and diesel. For the first time in months, Ironwood Acres looked like what it was always supposed to be, a neighborhood, not a battlefield. Karen's arrest had made national headlines for a week straight, but like all scandals, it eventually became old news. The TV trucks packed up the reporters left, and people returned to mowing lawns and grilling burgers. But beneath that new calm, something had changed, something deeper than fences or property lines. I could feel it every time I stepped outside. The looks that once carried suspicion now carried gratitude. People waved, kids shouted, "Hi, mister." Haze from their bikes instead of avoiding my driveway like it was radioactive. The fear was gone. And the trench, or rather the place where it once carved through my land, had become something else entirely. I'd turned it into a flower bed, long and winding, planted with rows of wild daisies and lavender. It wasn't perfect. The soil was still uneven and rough in spots, but that somehow made it more honest. Every bloom felt like a small apology from the earth for what we'd all been through. Sometimes I'd stand there at dusk, listening to the breeze hum through the windmill, and think about how something so ugly had given birth to something so peaceful. Karen's trial came faster than anyone expected. Mike kept me updated as things unfolded. The evidence was airtight, he told me. Forgery wire, fraud, misappropriation of funds, it's all there. They even found she used HOA dues to pay off her car. I sighed. The red SUV, yep, paid in full with your neighbor's landscaping money. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. When the verdict finally came in guilty on all counts, I didn't celebrate. I didn't cheer. I just sat on my porch, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, staring out at the garden. Some part of me had expected to feel triumph, but instead I felt something softer, something like relief, and maybe a little sadness. Because in the end, even after everything she'd done, Karen was just a person, someone who wanted control so badly that she'd forgotten how to coexist. After the trial, the county asked if I wanted to retain ownership of the HOA assets. I could have kept everything, the clubhouse, the pool, even the greenbelt land, but I didn't want any of it. I'm not here to rule anyone, I told them. I just want my neighborhood back. So I dissolved the association entirely. The legal paperwork took weeks, but the effect was immediate. For the first time in decades, Ironwood Acres was officially free. No more dues, no more fines, no more Karen-style dictatorships. At first, people didn't know what to do with that freedom. Some worried it meant chaos, unpainted mailboxes, mismatched fences, kids' toys left in yards. But slowly, they realized it meant something better: trust. Neighbors started helping each other again. A retired carpenter fixed a broken porch for free. A group of teenagers repainted old street signs. Even the Daltons, who hadn't spoken to anyone in years, hosted a neighborhood cookout. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. A few weeks later, I got a letter. Handwritten. The return address stopped me: Cold County Correctional Facility, Block C. I almost threw it away. Almost. But curiosity won. Inside was a single page. No apologies. No excuses. Just one line in Karen's neat looping handwriting. I still believe I was right, but maybe I dug too deep. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and slid it into a drawer. That was the closest thing to peace I was ever going to get from her. And maybe that was enough. One evening, not long after the neighborhood gathered in my yard for a small celebration, part potluck, part farewell to the HOA. Kids chased each other with sparklers, while the adults shared stories about the old days when Karen ran things. Someone handed me a plate of barbecue and said, "You know, Robert, if you ever run for mayor, you've already got our votes." I laughed. One HOA is enough for a lifetime, thanks. As the night stretched on, I noticed how the garden glowed faintly under the porch, lights those flowers standing where the trench had once been rooted deep in the same soil that Karen had torn apart. It hit me then how symbolic it all was, something born from damage thriving anyway. That's what recovery looks like. Not perfection, just persistence. Later that night, long after everyone had gone home, I stayed on the porch nursing one last cup of coffee. The stars above Ironwood were bright and endless, the kind of sky my father used to call a clean slate. I thought about him, about how he taught me to fix things with patience, not anger, about how he used to say, "The land remembers what you put into it." He was right. Karen had put in fear and control. I'd chosen truth and time. And the land, like always, reflected that. Before turning in, I took one last walk along the flower bed. The air smelled faintly of lavender. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, the sound echoing like a reminder that nature doesn't care about fences or bylaws. It just is. As I traced the curve of the garden, I saw something glint in the soil, a small, rusty metal sign half buried near the edge. I knelt down and pulled it free. It was one of Karen's old HOA enforcement aria signs, bent and faded, the paint peeling off. For a second, I just stared at it. Then I smiled, set it upright in the middle of the flowers, and whispered, "Rest in peace, Ironwood HOA." And maybe in that moment it really did. If there's one thing this whole ordeal taught me, it's that power built on fear never lasts. You can control people with threats, fines, and fancy titles for a while, but eventually truth shows up with its receipts. Karen thought she could dig a trench deep enough to isolate me. What she didn't realize was that she was just building the walls of her own downfall. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like fire or fury. Sometimes it looks like patience, the kind that lets people expose themselves through their own arrogance. I learned that you can't always stop others from trying to bury you, but you can make sure they dig on the wrong side of the line. And if you wait long enough, those same trenches can become gardens. So to anyone dealing with your own HOA, Karen, remember this: you don't have to fight dirty to win. Let the truth do the digging. Let time do the talking. What would you have done if your HOA dug a trench around your house? Tell me in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for the next unbelievable story from the world of HOA drama.